All right, there she is, Delegate Danica Roem. Am I saying your last name
Rome,
right?
pronounced it like the city. Yep.
Thank you so much for joining me on Stand Up. I'm so super excited to have you. I think you're such a superstar, and I love the new book. Congratulations on its publishing. Burn the Page, a true story of torching doubts, blazing trails, and igniting change. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm so grateful to be with you here today, Pete.
Let's just start with the kind of the positive before we go into the book. And I mean, you have an amazing sense of humor, and this is such a great memoir and so important and relevant now. But I just wanted to start with something positive, which is what have you heard from people as you've come out publicly and as you campaign, and even when you were elected? I'm sure that you have been an inspiration for so many. What are the nice things, positive things that people say to you as a result of what you've accomplished?
Well, let's just start with the results as opposed to just what people said. When I earned my first election in 2017, and I detail that very much in terms of how we did that in Burn the Page. Right after that election, I heard from someone in Colorado named Brianna Chateau, who said, "Hey, I always wanted to run for office. I didn't know this was available for people like us. And what advice do you have?" And I said, "Well, go through the LGBTQ Victory Institute's candidate campaign training program, just like I did." And so she did. And I said, "And go through Emerge Colorado's candidate campaign training program for Democratic women, just like I did with Emerge Virginia." And she did. And then in a race that no one saw coming, she flipped it red to blue that fall in 2018. And she was one of three trans state legislators elected the year after I was elected. And so what it showed was that in 2017, when 8 out trans people won nationwide, and I just happened to be one of them, I was just the only state legislator among the group, that when we won, we showed people the politics of what's possible. And we wanted to encourage people to be able to succeed because of who you are, not despite it, and not for what discriminatory politicians tell you you're supposed to be. And now we went from 0 to 1 to 4 to now 8 outstate legislators who are trans, including the first state senator, Sarah McBride, who's my friend out in Delaware, the first native trans woman, over Stephanie Byers in Kansas, which is also amazing. And you look at where they are, and that you have Rosemary Ketchum in West Virginia of all places, along the dozens of out trans state or local elected officials, I should say, at this point. And what I think everyone is showing is that, hey, you know what? It's one thing to talk a good game. It's another thing to deliver on it. And when we won in 2017, we inspired people from across the country not only to pursue politics, but to be their authentic sense of self, and to, as we said in my 13 years of Catholic school, be who you are and be that well. And as I like to add to the end of that, thrive because of who you are, not despite it.
That was a motto at your Catholic school.
Yeah, there was a quote from St. Francis de Sales. So there's 2 things that you learn in Catholic school. One is that quote from St. Francis de Sales, and the other thing that you learn is conversion therapy does not work.
Were you subjected to it?
Insofar as, well, let's put it this way. I was a closet case, but when you were like celebrating mass on Fridays and your priest is giving anti-gay, homilies, that's wildly unhelpful. When you have to fill out a question on a test, which I mentioned in the book, where the supposed right answer is supposed to be that homosexuality is wrong because God created Adam and Eve instead of Adam and Steve. Like, well, actually, God created Adam and Steve as well. And sometimes Adam and Steve are super cute together and they need to get married. So, just like we had constant, affirmations of being LGBTQ is wrong, is the way they would put it, because they would tell you to love the sinner but hate the sin. And I said, well, then, hey, wait a minute. Then that means that you're saying that I need to hate the very core part of my identity that allows me to be loved, to fall in love, to express love to someone else. And, I don't believe that that's right. And so, now I'm just in a position where I get to have a platform where I can tell people to be their best sense of self, which is what I really hope we accomplished in this book, because I think what I set out to do with it was encourage people to set fire to the stories they don't want to be in anymore. And, own their own narratives.
I love that. And I want to get to that. But you talk about how you identify. We all talk about how we identify and who we are, maybe at our core, as you just said. But you're a very complicated person in that you're a very layered person. You have a lot of interests. You've lived a lot of lives, and the chapters in your book, for example, are titled "Loser," "Lifer," "Metalhead," "Hack," "Drunk," "Vagabond," "Whore," "Danica," "Sellout," "Headliner," "Showtime." And I just think that's a great way just to lead into who are you? Who were you as a young person? Like, what was your childhood like? You write about it, and I always think it's a really interesting thing to talk about with anybody in an interview, much less in life, but certainly with you.
Well, so along with being a transgender metalhead reporter, yogini, stepmom, vegetarian, just your run of the day just run of the
Right.
mill every day, a cat mom, really. What I would tell you though is that like when I was a kid,
I'm sorry, did you just water your entire identity down to cat mom?
I had to do that
That's
because I
unnecessarily
got
so.
one of my two little guys is just hanging out right here. He's my tuxedo, my
How
polydactyl.
many
He's got
how
thumbs.
many how many cats do you need to own or take care of to identify as cat mom? Because you said
Really, I mean, like one is the bare minimum, but I strongly recommend 2 plus.
okay.
Three is
Interrupted
also an
you.
acceptable number. Yeah, sure.
Sorry. Sorry,
But
I interrupted you with as you were talking about how you
yeah,
identify.
what's funny though is like I've had animals almost my entire life. There's
Mhm.
a couple months in my life where I have not had pets. So that's a cool thing.
Why
And
do you
hey,
hate
from
dogs?
what was that?
Why do you hate dogs?
Why do well, here's the thing. I mean, just the slanderous lies that are coming from Pete
Well,
Dominick,
I
it's
came up in the at the Colbert Report, so that's my interview style. Just insinuate that you hate dogs because there aren't any there,
well,
and
so what's funny is if I were to take that and were to put it in the political context, right, of the importance of owning your own narratives, I've been asked by a few reporters why I included a bit in the book about like one of the chapters starts with a bit of self-opposition research where
yeah.
it said that I had performed a keg stand, that my friends yelled suck it as I was doing it, and then they said that I had thrown the keg through a window. Seriously, it's like whoa. Okay, look, first two, yeah, did I do a keg stand when I was 23 years old? Yes. Did my friends indeed in their kindness of heart yell suck it as I did it? Also, yes, because that is absolutely my friends, and 100% of them watching this would very much enjoy that. At the same time, did that last part happen of throwing through the window? No, because number one, I don't have the upper body strength to be able to do that feat, and number two, someone would have lost their security deposit if I did, and that did not happen.
By
So
the way,
there's a bit about just want I put that in there because I want people to see that the things that are about you out there online, not all of it's true. And some of the stuff that when other people are telling your story, that means that they can get things wrong, incorrect, and sometimes they have malicious intent. And we have to own our own narratives to make sure that who we are is accurately portrayed in the world so we can be our authentic sense of self no matter who we're around.
it's so hard to accurately portray or to own your own narrative now because someone can go on Facebook and write Danica Roem anything they want,
Yep.
and you're immediately on the defensive, which A looks bad, and you've already lost the narrative. How did you combat that in your campaign and in your life?
Sure. So the first thing is that campaigns are based on contrast. And my contrast to any negative campaign was to have very specific action items that people could see and they could visualize right in front of them, where I wouldn't just talk about vague concepts like, transportation, jobs, schools, healthcare. It was fixing Route 28 with innovative intersection designs along the 28 corridor between Manassas Park and Yorkshire, the 6 lane and multimodal 6 lane that's happening in front of the Centerville multiplex right now, as well as removing all the traffic lights at 66 and 28 interchange, which by the way is actually now done, which is awesome, amazing. And then I would talk about we need mass transit out in Haymarket and Gainesville. And so I voted for the funding that delivered the first commuter bus OmniRide that links Haymarket and Northern Gainesville out to 5 metro stations a day over in Arlington. I talked about, instead of just healthcare, about expanding Medicaid so that at the time we were projecting 400,000 people, including 3,800 people of the 13th district would be able to be enrolled in quality affordable health insurance after my predecessor voted against it. And what do we do? May 30th, 2018, I voted for it. And on January 1st, 2019, after enrollment began, we've now enrolled more than 650,000 Virginians in Medicaid expansion.
Wow.
Those are 650,000 people not left uninsured during a worldwide pandemic. And for teacher pay, I've now gotten a chance to vote for teacher pay in each budget that I've gotten a chance to vote for. And I say all the nerdy, wonky stuff because I want your listeners, your viewers, to just really understand that this is what your public servant legislator or even your local legislator is supposed to be doing, the core quality of life stuff. And when you lay out specific agenda items, you do it as a means of accountability so people can say, they can follow along with you and say, hey, you're doing this, you're not doing this, you said you would do this, and now you're doing it this way, da da da. But so many people are afraid of that accountability. They just campaign on vague platitudes and bullshit. That can't be how our politics is conducted. We need to be real with people. And that's why, as a reporter turned legislator who spent 10 and a half years vetting facts, going through an editorial process, and reporting the news as it is instead of how other people wanted it to be, I had a transferable skill set that I was able to put on display and say, hey, follow along, hold me accountable. I am totally okay with that. And now 32 of my bills have been signed into law because I laid out that roadmap, and they've all happened with bipartisan support from a trans woman in the South. If I'm able to do this, I think a lot more people can be successful too.
How were you able to do it, especially given the fact that your opponent was a 26-year incumbent who was, in my opinion, my words, vile when it came to so much of, well, how you identify and LGBT issues in general? I mean, how does a district elect that guy over and over and over, and then you? Like, I don't understand.
So I had a couple of reporters ask me during the 2017 campaign. They said, like, well, if he's as problematic as you say he is, then why does he keep winning? I go, oh, because he hasn't run against me yet. And so they were just like, like, hey, do you have your head up your ass in that comment? Just like, no, I'm a lifelong resident of the 13th district. I was born at Prince William Hospital, September 30th, 1984. I'm speaking to you from the Manassas part of Prince William County right now at age 37. This is my home. And I covered it as a newspaper reporter for 9 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks from 2006 to 2015, when I authored more than 2,500 news stories about the greater Prince William area, which is all to say, I know the issues of my community. I was willing to hustle by putting myself out there and knocking a ton of doors. We had a ton of volunteers, raised a bunch of money. We executed all the fundamentals of running a good campaign. And for the first time in the 26 years that he had been in office and running for office, he was out organized. He had never been out organized in a campaign before, and we did it. And I hope that we can show that as a model to encourage people to get behind those of us who don't always come from central casting. I was unemployed, uninsured, driving a $324.92 Dodge Shadow when I kicked off that campaign. That was someone who was electable, it turned out.
You were not one of those elite rich journalists.
Oh, yeah. Because of all that money in community newspapers. Absolutely.
Let's go back to your childhood. I really want to kind of dig into the story that you tell about growing up. What was it like growing up there? And when did things become confusing, if you will?
No, well, so I mean, I knew I was trans by the time I was 10, but at the same time, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. I only knew one out gay person by the time I even graduated high school. And, he was 2 years older than I was. And, he's a friend of my sister's. And after that, that was it. And so I didn't have representation. I didn't have people who were going to understand what this life is like. And when I would see it on television, it would be like watching daytime talk shows like Jenny Jones and Jerry Springer and Maury Povich and whoever else. And often, trans people were presented as caricatures. They weren't presented as real, right?
Right.
And we were often the villain in movies and, stuff like Ace Ventura and Silence of the Lambs. Otherwise, I watched Ace Ventura. I laughed when I watched it. And that was also a lot of people's first introduction to what a trans person is, who is made out to be the villain. And when someone is not commonly portrayed and the first portrayal of that person is negative, that informs how people think about them. And in Silence of the Lambs, amazing movie. At the same time, when that is how people learn about trans people, it can be very problematic. And so, growing up here, I write about in the book, about, playing baseball and there's like the one girl on the team, and the guys would say whatever about her, and I was like, I just want to wear her pink scrunchie, and I didn't have people to just like confide in about this. It was just so instead I had to explore that kind of survival toxicity almost of that form of masculinity where you're sexist and misogynistic toward other people just because it's just like, oh well, guys don't talk about girls like that. They're either, oh yeah, she's hot, or oh she's ugly, or they would, or you insult or whatever. You're not like, oh hey, I love how you did your French braids today. It's just internalizing a lot of that was, on the one hand, you could call it a survival mechanism, coping mechanism, whatever it is, overcompensation, clearly. And at the same time, I hope that the mistakes I made as a kid, I've now been able to, do something to make up for in terms of my advocacy, especially as the new executive director for Merge Virginia, where my job is to recruit and train Democratic women to run for office, trying to empower women instead of talking down, and trying to, get people to believe that we can accomplish anything just as any guy can. And so I really want to make sure that when people are reading Burn the Page, that they see that very raw bit of humanity that does come from my childhood. It does come from what it's like growing up as a closet case in the South, where my district includes the first battlefield of the Civil War. This is this is not the part of Virginia. It's Arlington and Alexandria or Charlottesville or Williamsburg. This is Manassas. This is Manassas. So we got more things named after Stonewall Jackson here than we have named after Starbucks.
And yet you won this election. I think it says a lot about you and how as you talked about how you campaign. What was your relationship like with your parents?
Well, I mean, my dad killed himself when I was 3 years old, so and it was very intentional and very violent. It was he immolated himself in the backyard, and so my mom,
He
she ended up
immolated
being.
himself, you said?
I'm sorry.
What did you say he did?
Immolated, as in like he took gas canister, poured it over himself, and lit himself on fire. Yeah, that was 2 days after Christmas in 1987. So, like that was when I was 3 years old, and and by the time I was 7, my grandmother, who I also lived with, she moved in after with my grandfather after my dad died. She had Parkinson's, and so she ended up dying. And so 2 of my immediate family members who I had lived with, died by the time I was 7. And I write about in the book, some of the other traumas and stuff from my childhood and everything. But in my mom's case, she was responsible for in 1987, that day, she was now responsible for raising 2 young kids aged 5 and 3, having a brand new mortgage that she just got that passed in May, and dealing with aging parents who she would be responsible for, and all while having to battle a horrendous commute to get to her job, and a commute that she did for 40 years, and so my mom and I are very different politically, and an Italian household, argument is communication. So, that was and still is very, very much how, how we talk and stuff. But
I am
I
quite
learned my
familiar.
resilience and my, perseverance from my mom. And, it was just so funny in 2017. And I mentioned this in the book. I was like, there is nothing that the Republicans were going to throw at me in terms of a debate. No, never mind the fact that Bob Marshall refused to debate me, whatever. But I was like, there's nothing you were going to throw at me that I hadn't already heard from my mother. My Fox News watching, union labor hating, Republican voting ma, who hadn't voted for a Democrat for president since 1976, and quote, and that was a mistake. All right. That's where I come from. This is Italian Sicilian Bronxite who's tough as nails. And at the same time, my mom, her, just everything that she did to make sure that our family could stay together and to, to grow up with at least some level of normalcy. That resilience is the most profound thing I've ever had in my life.
That's a wonderful way to look at it, and such an important view. And for people to understand, we can be on such opposite ends of so many different ideas and issues, especially as people get radicalized by media, all types of media, and yet still care for each other, one another, and family and friends especially. But it's hard. It certainly is hard. Tell me about the opposition research that you had done, what you found out, and how you included that both in your campaign and the book, and that's in some extent where the title comes from.
Yeah, sure. So in the book, every chapter leads with a hit on me in some way, right? And so some of that was self-opposition research. We want to know what stories about me were out there on the internet, true, not true, or any other places for that matter. And so I paid someone to dig it up, and like I was a investigative reporter. I know how to do that stuff myself, and I did. And when the book came back at first, I was like, this part's wrong, this is wrong, this is typo, all this other stuff, and so I was putting my own like reporting and editing skills to use when I was seeing it, but just simply seeing what was available in terms of hits and stuff, I was like, okay, that helped me understand at least what stories other people would potentially want to tell about me, right? So that was a start. And then there were negative newspaper headlines, editorial that was highly critical of me. There was all the mailers, my favorite part, the Republicans mailers against me that were so just, well, one, stupid, but second, just like they were so far out there. And my favorite part of any of the chapter titles and stuff is the very last one for epilogue, because one of the mailers that they sent out against me said, Danica Roem wants a book deal. And yeah, that's the title for the epilogue.
Danica Roem wants a book deal.
Now it's Danica Roem, or the way I would have put it is, out of work reporter wants to keep writing. And yeah, it turns out I did.
I love it when you do. It's always a funny joke structure to use negative tone about something amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of that.
Woman lives with and loves her cats.
Do you know how many times in 2017, like the first, so like the same mailer that had the thing about what was it? The thing about the book deal. It starts by saying, Danica Roem, born male, has made a campaign issue out of transitioning to female. And it's like black backdrop with red scary font over it and everything, right?
Wait, born male is like happy music.
Yeah. Just like hanging out there, just so you know, it's right there. And while they're doing it, it's like, transgender candidate is transgender. Oh my God. And who's supporting transgender candidates, transgender campaign? Other transgender people.
And then the what is the song from The Empire Strikes Back? The Empire March. Bum, 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 like, and just you in a stormtrooper helmet.
Yeah, they tried that, but I found that the Emperor Palpatine makeup was not a good fit for me. So I really decided that maybe a little bit more Leah was a little better, and turned out that worked.
That's awesome. And a lot of it though isn't awesome. Just so many more stories in Burn the Page. A true story of torching doubts. What doubts did you torch?
Well, geez, could a trans woman be elected, right? Could some or the rest of it? Like I'll even go back to when I was being recruited to run for office, and Delegate Rip Sullivan, who's the recruiting chair of the House Dem Caucus, he says to me, I'm less concerned about you being transgender than you being a metalhead. And I'd fronted heavy metal bands for 12 years, and so that was something that the Republicans were very happy to pounce all over. And
why?
One of my favorite.
What's the wedge there? I mean, everybody loves the liberals and conservatives. Republicans and Democrats all love heavy metal, don't they?
Well, it's that they have bad taste in music when they attack me. That's all it comes down to. But no, like one of the things that, like, my band shot a comedy music video in 2012, and they tried to use that against me, where they were just like, and Danica Roem implied, and this was a direct quote from the then executive director of the Republican Party of Virginia, who said, Danica Roem implied that she performed group oral sex in a public restroom. And my response in the book is, implied? And then after that, I thought it was pretty direct. But what I was really trying to do with that is find the humor when you get attacked. And this is the more general thing I want to just like tell people, is that when other people are awful to you and stuff, you have a choice in that moment. Are you going to take that information and allow it to just fester and bring you down? Or are you going to find a coping mechanism that's healthy, that is based in resilience, and flip the script on it and find a way to make it work for you? I love stand-up comedy. I grew up on a very steady diet of George Carlin. And so when people say negative stuff to me, I try to find the humor in it. And that's what I did with that. I mean, what else am I supposed to do when there's a Washington Post headline about me 2 weeks before my election that says Marshall Ad accuses Rome of lewd behavior in old video of her band? Like, well, then I can either, be like, oh my God, I've been attacked in the Washington Post. What will I ever do? Or I can make a joke about it, pivot to the real issues that we're dealing with, and then go and own my
Yeah,
narrative.
it's something like, yes, I engage in lewd behavior and I want to bury your power lines in this district. Right?
Or in very many cases, prevent them from even happening in the first place. But that's a different story.
Well, yeah, but the idea is like, don't get distracted with the attack pad. I want to improve your life.
That's right. That's right. And look, and here's the other thing. When Donald Trump in 2016 bragged about sexually assaulting women, and his whole thing that was, locker room talk and everything. It's like, well, then what the hell in my background disqualifies me from running for office? I'm like, what? Because you made a funny video once? It's like, yeah, give me an effing break. So
Locker room talk.
Look, in that regard, the dam has burst, and you cannot be from central casting and still perform well and do well with constituent service. This is why not only have we passed 32 of my bills into law with bipartisan support, and our Republican governor just signed 9 of my trans Democratic bills, but what have we also done? We're badass at constituent service. We show up. We've had more than 30 town halls in my district, and surrounding area. It's just, I want people to, get out of this book that sense of, hey, wait a minute, this is for me too. And as I said in the book, this is your America too, and it's time for you to run it.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love you. I'm so inspired by it. I really appreciate you joining me. I know you have other interviews to do. I hope listeners will go buy the book, Burn the Page. And I hope that you'll come back and talk to me whenever you want about these issues. I love talking policy. And I think that the stuff that you've done and the stuff that you've accomplished is really interesting and important and really great role modeling, not only for why people should run, but for what once they get elected, they should do. So congratulations and thank you.
Thank you so much, Pete. I'm so grateful that you brought me on today, and good luck with everything you have ahead.